Okay, guys, today is going to be the focus is going to be on the conditions that enable your people to create the success. And this is something that I've been including in my leadership programs from the time I learned about this, or this concept about 7 years ago. And what I'm going to share with you is taking this concept, and I was reflecting on my own leadership and as to what are the three conditions that I like to work with. And I didn't think of about that way when I was leading, but maybe this will help you guys too. Okay. So welcome everybody as you're coming in here. Let me share with you a story that had a huge impact on me, and this where this conditions comes from. There was a podcast with a very famous entrepreneur, and the entrepreneur made a provocative statement. He said this. He said, true entrepreneurs do not set out to create success. Success is not their focus. He said, true entrepreneurs set out to create the conditions that enable their people to create the success. So think about it. If I'm an entrepreneur and I need to be here every minute in company number one to keep it a success, when do I have time to start company number two? Right? So if you don't create an environment that enable your people to deliver, and you have to be there around them and with them all the time to make sure they deliver, then you can't go off and create another company. So think about this, not if you're not an entrepreneur, but if you're a leader. If your people cannot deliver without you always there, then you are the pace of your organization and you always have to be around. So if you're not around when they need help and they just sit and wait for an hour or two, you lost an hour or two's productivity and so forth. So keep in mind this, the highest leveraged question you can ask yourself as a leader is this: what are the conditions that enable my people to deliver the success? Because if your people are being able to deliver without you, you're going to be much more successful. Okay. So keep in mind that story about that. You know, successful entrepreneurs say, it's not success I'm after the conditions that enable my people to create that success. That allows me to then go and create company number two, number three, number four, number five. If you have 10 companies, you can't be in 10 places at once in these things. Okay, so let's take you through the three that I came up with. The first one that I used to use, and I kind of reflected back, is enough clarity. You got to have enough clarity because people need to be able to take action on their own. You have to have people with business judgment, because if you don't trust people's business judgment, they can't make decisions on their own. Who has to be around there to help them? You. Okay. The third one is you need people with influencing skills. You need people who can collaborate on their own, can resolve issues on their own without you always having to be the policeman in the middle. Also, you need people who can influence across the company and also into your customers and your vendors. Because think about it, if they can't influence that, you have to always be around there. Okay? So keep in mind this, and it's so important for you to, think about what are your conditions, okay? Think about the conditions that you have. I'll tell you one thing that you always will have as a condition of success is people. Because if you don't have the right person who can't make the decisions, you've got to do something about that person, or else you're always going to be needed. And a key thing around this, I would say, the first thing is, if you're a person who likes to be needed, you're not going to be a great leader. Because if you need to be needed, you want to be in the middle of the action, you always put yourself in a position where you have to be around to tell people what to do. Okay? So those are the three conditions. So it's all about enabling your people to be able to do things on their own without you always there trying to tell them what to do. Okay? So let's go through one by one to give you an idea. Okay? First, before I go, any questions on that concept of conditions for success? And any questions so far on these three conditions? You can use the chat function through and ask the questions as we go, or you can just quick raise your hand. I'm not seeing everybody. We have over 55 people on right now. Okay. So any questions, comments? Nope. Okay, let's go onward. First condition, enough clarity. Think about this. In something in your organization, if something isn't clear, is something good happening or bad happening? Usually bad, right? So, the job of a leader is to create enough clarity. And oftentimes people will say to me, well, but how do you know if you have enough clarity? If people are taking action in the direction you want them to go and at the pace you want them to take, then probably you have enough clarity. Okay. So, you really, as people in direction and pace, you probably have enough clarity. But also, you got to ask some questions. The quality of your questions as a leader will judge if your people have enough clarity to take that action too. So, there's a concept that I'll share on a future video, a virtual masterclass around nose in, fingers out, NIFO. Your nose, it has to be in all the time because you need to be testing this clarity. And to be honest, as a leader, you're not going to feel comfortable and feel in control unless you feel your people have that clarity. But, think about this too. Direction and pace is very important for another reason. See, the most successful people can choose between great and good. Everybody can choose between good and bad, but direction and pace enables you to start choosing the great. And whenever you choose the great, because there's not enough time to do all the good, you're moving to the future faster. So basically, clarity is always getting people taking action in the direction you want to go and at the pace you'd like to have them. And so, you also want that pace because everybody needs a sense of urgency. I've never seen a successful team who didn't have a sense of urgency, right? They want to get things done. So you got to constantly be focused on creating enough clarity so that your people can take action without you. Okay. It's very interesting. Benjamin Zander has a very good 2-minute video, and maybe I'll put the link in the materials that when I send you guys later. He says, I figured out, he's an orchestra conductor, famous orchestra conductor. I think maybe it's Boston. And he said, everything changed for me when I realized that me as an orchestra conductor, I don't play a note. I don't play any instrument. My job is to enable everybody else to play well and to work together and collaborate that way. So, think about that. People can't play well together if things aren't clear. Okay. So, it's providing enough clarity. There's never perfect clarity, because if you're focused on creating perfect clarity, you're not going to get enough done. So also you need to hire people who can deal with some ambiguity, but create enough clarity in their mind to still take action. Okay. So give you a tip here. You will rise to the level of ambiguity you can handle. Okay. So the higher you climb in any organization, the things are less clear. And it's your job as a leader to make them clear so your people can take action. So keep that in mind. Now we're living in a world of total ambiguity, and you're seeing leadership rise in this environment because only the best leaders can really deal with ambiguity. Okay. So think about this. It's your job as a leader to create enough clarity for your people to take action. That is absolutely important. And if you think about action and understanding direction, pace, understanding what they need to do, understanding that you want them to make more decisions, think about this. Leaders are the context providers. You provide the context by which they take action. So how you frame everything is very, very important that way, and frame it in a way that they can understand it. Okay. So your communication skills are so important in this way. One last thing I want to mention here is that there's one key skill I found in very good leaders that saves everybody time. Is very good leaders are concise. They have the ability to be concise, and to be able to then expand it or, you know, modify it depending on the personality they're talking to. But they have that ability to say a lot in a few words. You're not going to waste people's time. But think about it this way. If you have the ability to be concise in communication, when you're concise in getting a message across, you're giving your people more time to ask you questions and clarify things that they really want to know. So by being concise, you're enabling your people to talk more, and it's very powerful. Okay. So first condition for success, you need to create enough clarity for people to be able to take action on their own. They need to have a good sense of the direction, the sense of urgency, the pace, you know, sort of the boundaries and different things, but they need enough clarity that they take action on their own. Okay. Any questions so far? Does that make sense, guys? Put a thumbs up or yep in the chat function. Good. So first one is always clarity. So your job is clarity. And if I just reinforce one last thing, don't be afraid of ambiguity, because it's the leader's job to create enough clarity out of ambiguity so their people can take action. So if you're avoiding ambiguity, by default, you're not providing clarity to your team. So that's really, really key. Okay. So let's take a look at the second one, business judgment. Okay. You know, over the years, I found, and I work with different people, most people's biggest headaches come from when they don't have people who can make decisions for them in their team. And I found this very insightful one. Then I reflected back on myself, and the same thing was true. Whenever you lose someone with business judgment, you lose personal life. Whenever you lose someone with business, you lose personal life. So let's do a little example here. You have 5 people in your team. You have one key person in your team you trust like 95%, right? They leave the company tomorrow. Your replacement, you only trust 40%. How does Monday morning look? Not very good, right? And only one person changed, right? Now the tendency too, let me ask you a quick question. Come back via the chat function here. If you have 5 people in your team, 3 you trust to a certain level, 2 you don't trust, which of the people do you spend the most time with? Right? The people you trust or the people you don't trust? Come back through the chat function. What do you think? Who do you spend the most time with? Yeah, the ones you don't trust. So the ones you don't trust, you spend your most time with, and you're not growing the people and working with the people that are driving your success, which is the people you trust. So be careful about this. Whenever you don't trust someone and you don't believe they're going to grow to a point where you're going to trust them, you've got to do something about it. Okay. What I found too as a leader, you can't always support all the people who aren't strong by yourself. You need someone else in the team to help them too. But you need people with good business judgment. Now, you know, the thing is, you gotta help people grow. But to be honest, you have to focus on the people who are growing your success and the people who can make decisions. Think about this. You know, the biggest problem with company owners when they sell their business is they never delegated decisions in their organization. So if they leave, all the decision power goes. So when you have decisions happening throughout the organization, you have value creating in the organization as well. Okay. So you've got to hire people with good business judgment. Yeah, it's great to have people with good attitude, good values. But if they don't have the fundamental common sense to make good decisions, then you will always have to be involved, because you can't come up from here, make a decision without knowing anything. You have to drop down and sort of do their job in order for the decision to get made. So, let me ask you a quick question, guys. How would you test business judgment in an interview? Okay. Any ideas? Come back through the chat function. How would you test business judgment in an interview? See what you come up with here. Oop. Problem to solve, examples of decisions, scenarios. Yep. I tell you, here's what I found. You got to use more scenarios, and the best companies maybe have like 10 to 15 scenarios for every key job, and those scenarios are split over different interviewers. Okay. So if you're using the same scenarios in including other different things, you're getting a baseline about how people react and everything, and you're starting to see when people are trying to snow you or tell you different things. So you've got to test business judgment. You have to hire for business judgment, but you have to continue to grow business judgment. Okay. So here's another quick question for you. What's your best way? What's your best techniques for growing business judgment? Have you used? What do you think is the best way to grow someone's judgment? Just quick comments back through the chat. Coach and mentor? Yeah. Yeah, you have to give them some freedom. Yeah. Yeah. So think about this. You have to give them some type of freedom. So, the best way to test and give people freedom is give people projects. Because in a project, you can control the parameters around it, and it doesn't hurt you as much if they don't make a great decision. Okay. So keep in mind that projects are a great way to test, because you can make small, medium, large projects, and you can test people with judgment things all around the organization. You got to delegate more. You got to delegate outcomes, not activities. Think about it. You delegate activities to people, you're not buying any more heads. You're just buying arms and legs to get things done. That's why a micromanager is like an individual contributor with more arms and legs. You're not using their heads. You're just using more arms and legs. And micromanagement comes with a speed limit, right? So you need to really think about this. And also, you got to be a little bit more open as a leader. You have to share with people why you're making certain decisions, the rationale behind the decision. Because when you start doing that, they start learning, your thought process behind making the decisions. They can apply it to the same thing. Okay. One last thing on this. A great way to really get deeper with someone's thinking is ask people what assumptions are they making when they share what they would do in this scenario. Assumptions are interesting because assumptions really show people's experience about how and what they fill in with what they don't know. That's why in the university and other things, I use one paragraph scenarios, because people have to fill in what's not stated, and you see their experience, you see their judgment by how they fill in what they don't know. Okay, so keep in mind that. One last question for you guys. Let me ask you this: you got a bright person in your team. They have the ability to make good judgment. They might not have the experience, and so forth. How many months do you think you would need to grow that judgment in them to the point where you would trust them to 80, 90%? How many months do you think it takes to get people's judgment? Come back via the chat function. How many months do you think it takes to grow someone's judgment? 6 to 12 we have here? 3 to 6? I tell you, it took me at least 9 months to grow them to 80% and about 18 months to go to 90 in the parameters. But, think about this. You're never going to trust someone 100%. Therefore, you need to put boundaries around people in terms of to the level you trust, because you have to start letting go before you totally trust people. Because if you wait till you totally trust people, you will never let go. So keep in mind the boundaries you set. Why do some leaders not set boundaries? Why do some leaders not delegate? Because they think they never have time to do that. It's faster for me to do it. So, hey, I'll just do it this once. But just this once happens so many times per year, and you end up doing things you shouldn't be doing. Okay. So business judgment, hire for it, grow it, test it constantly. And I say the best thing you could do to test business judgment and also get something done is by giving people projects to lead. You can give people projects at all different levels of the company. You test it in a little safer environment, and your goal there is to support them being very successful delivering that project. Okay, make sense, guys? So we talked about clarity. We talked about business judgment. Let's talk about the last one, influencing skills. Think about it. If people can't work together, let me ask you this question. If people can't work together in your team and they can't resolve an issue and everything, where does the conflict go? Where does the conflict go? If they can't do it themselves, it goes to who? Goes to you, goes up. You know, if they can't influence the customer or the vendor, who's going to handle the conflict? It's always going to, or the issues, or the influence. You're going to have to ride alongside on the meeting. So you need people who can influence each other. Particularly, the number one thing you need to grow in people is the ability to influence their peers. Think about it. Peer influence. You know, think about it. If you're influencing up, bosses kind of have to listen to you because you're helping them get their bonus. If you're influencing down, they definitely have to listen to you because you're paying them. But if you're influencing across, people that don't have to necessarily listen to you. That means coworkers, other departments, peers. That also means customers, vendors, etc. Now, for 8 years, I taught at the IE Business School, and I coached global executive MBA students informally for 4, and another 3 or 4 formally. These guys are very, very bright people, average age 35, and the most powerful of those students all had great peer influencing skills. Okay? If I ask you this question, where does your power come in any company? Does it come from your ability to influence up and down? Or does your power come from your ability to influence across? Where do you think? Come back by the fact, up and down or across? Yeah, it's across. It's across, guys. So, you know, the more you developed influencing skills in your people, the more power you're gaining from the organization, and you're able to influence everybody around you. You know, it amplifies your power this way. So you need to grow people's ability to adapt. Right? The best way to grow influencing skills is to have a diverse team, because now they have to grow their influencing skills because they need to be able to adapt to each other. And think about this. One way that you know if you have a good diverse team or not, and if you have trust in an organization, is if people are willing to argue in the meeting. Because if they're not willing to argue in the meeting, they don't trust each other enough to say what they're thinking, and they're arguing after. So think about this. Here's a quick question for you. What would be the first thing come to your mind if you needed to grow your people's adaptability and influencing skills? What's the first thing you would do as a leader? Any ideas? If you had to grow your people's ability to adapt or influence, come back by the chat function. What would you do as a leader?
She doesn't like it.
Any ideas?
Just one, and then I try to be.
Introduce uncertainty there. Yeah.
It has to be by herself. Otherwise she doesn't.
Yeah. Look for people who can doing that. Team projects, different small projects, subset of projects are all good. you know, you got to definitely make them accountable. You got to have them working with people different all the time. Um, the key thing is your role models. You want to really focus on your role models. Okay, you want people to copy the good things. Let me share with you an interesting one. When I lived in Japan, but when this happened, I was only there for 2 weeks, and you know, every day there's a person coming through, a lady coming through, pushing a cart, selling teas, candies, and everything. And one day she brought a young girl with her, and it was her daughter. Now, I didn't know how to say daughter in Japanese at that time. She didn't know how to say daughter in English. So she said, "This is my copy." This is my copy. You know, think about it. You know, your children copy you, right? In an organization, everybody copies what works. So if you really reinforce getting key role models in your team adapting, people will learn from them as well. Okay. So I'd say for you guys, if you want to drive any cultural change, you want to drive any changes in your team, step one, who are your role models? And invest in your role models because people will start copying them. Okay. So, you know, keep in mind that, focus on your role models. I'd say one tip for you guys, particularly now, you're all working virtually. You're leading virtual meetings and things like this. If you want the right influence in the meeting, be careful who you call on first. Call on someone who will be more concise and productive, and it sets a pattern that everybody will follow. You call on someone who's always talking and round and round and round, and suddenly you set the wrong pattern that way. Okay. And believe me, the number one thing you can't do in a virtual environment is you can't waste people's time. So, tip around all these things, just in the environment we're working with now, run very good meetings, run very outcome focused meetings, because you can't afford to waste people's time. Okay. So keep growing your people's ability to adapt. There's some very good selling programs out there. There's some very good leadership programs out there, but I haven't found great influencing programs out there. Okay. What I'm going to do for you guys is I will put a cheat sheet of all the influence factors I got from all studying the research in this, and also the most ethical intermittent marketers. And I'll attach that as a little A5 sheet for you guys. Tell you, the more you grow your people's influencing skills, the more you grow yours, the more successful you're going to be. Because think about it, success is a team sport, right? And it's collaboration, and it's a collaboration towards the direction you want to go and the pace you want to go that means the most. Okay. Any questions on this influencing skills area? A good question for you guys. Okay. Ask yourself, how good is your peer influencing skills? How good are you at influencing people you do not have direct leverage with? Because the more you focus on growing those, the more successful you're going to be. Okay. Now, last thing before I take questions, because we're going to go about 45 minutes today. Here's an interesting concept, my how is who. Now, let me tell you the story why I generated this. I was coaching a very successful executive in the financial services firm. He has a Europe, Africa, Middle Eastern responsibility. Europe, Africa. And he had a huge problem. And I was only coaching him a couple months. First instinct was to call his best person into the office and tell them how to fix it. But he heard my voice in his head. So he called his best person into the office and he asked them, could you come back tomorrow morning with a few options? How could we fix this problem? Come back with 2 or 3 options. Person came back with 2 or 3 options. They picked one and the person went and fixed it. In fact, that's one of your best leadership questions. Ask people, what options do you think we have and why would one option be better than another? because now you get all the fuel to coach them towards the right answer. Okay. So that's a good. So the person went and fixed it. And he realized something. He says, I figured out my job. And in the subject line of the email he sent me, it said, my how is who. That's how he defines his job. So when I do this in classes, I always ask people, I say, once you know what you want to achieve, once you know why you want to achieve it, and by when you want to achieve it, what's your next thought? And when I do this in leadership classes, often half the room says how. It's not how, it's who. You have to think who, not how, as a leader. If you're thinking how, your solution is limited because it's only based on your knowledge and experience. The more you get who's involved, the better you have a solution. Second thing is, if you take the how halfway as a leader, okay, and you give it to your people, do they think it's theirs or do they think it's yours? They think it's yours, right? And so the third reason is too, the faster you get a who involved, the faster you can get rid of it, which is the most important reason, right? So keep this in mind. As a leader, your job is not how. You pay your people for how. Your job is to remove the obstacles so that they can deal with the how and they can take action. So, you have to be thinking who before how. And, you need a who, and you need to grow and hire and grow who's who can act on their own, decide on their own, and collaborate on their own. Because for everything they can't do those three, you're going to be there needed to help them. And as I said before, if they can't decide on their own, whatever your people can't decide on their own, it equals you losing personal life. Okay. So keep that in mind. So last thing I would say in this one, think about this, and this is going to sound like Dr. Seuss. If you don't have a who is the who? It's you, right? If you don't have a who, the who is always you. Okay. So keep this in mind, much as you can, think who. The faster you get a who involved, the faster you get rid of it. The faster you get the who to take the action, the more they're going to take ownership for that. Okay. And so you need who's that are going to be accountable. Oh, somebody doesn't have the mute on. Okay. So keep that in mind. Okay. So quick summary. Think about it. 3 things. Enough clarity, business judgment, influencing skills, so they can act on their own, decide on their own, and be able to influence each other, collaborate on their own. And your how is who. Now, here's a quick question for you. Before we finish, we take some questions. All 3 of these are important. Enough clarity, business judgment, influencing skills. But what did I consider more important than the other 2? Come back via the chat function and tell me which of these 3 did I consider more important than the others. What do you think? Which of those 3 did I consider more important? So we have influencing, clarity, influence, clarity. 1 for who? Oh, lots of influencing. To be honest, that wasn't the most important. The most important was business judgment. Now, let me ask you another question. Another way. Which one of these is the hardest to fix? Which of these 3 is the hardest to fix? Come back by the chat function. Which of the 3 are the hardest to fix? See, you're all coming back. It's judgment. Yeah. See, you can use your role models and your key people to help you keep enough clarity and to help with the influencing. But business judgment, either you trust them or you don't. And the minute you don't trust people, you're going to spend more time with them. So you end up spending more time with your poorer people and not enough with your best people. Okay? Think about it. The old study of strengths and weaknesses. The most successful people keep growing their strengths because that drives their success. Weaknesses only slow it. So keep in mind this. Spend more time investing in hiring for judgment and growing judgment, because this is going to hurt you the most if you don't have it. You can use your best people to help band-aid the clarity and the influencing, but judgment, you're going to struggle. Okay. Yeah. So guys, how did you find today? We went over about 40 minutes now. Do you pick up some things that you can use? Yeah. Any questions I can answer on these things? Any particular specific questions you might have? 3 great questions to test business judgment. Think about this. I found the best way to test judgment is scenarios, but I always ask for people's assumptions. And what's the most important of those assumptions? I'll ask them, okay, out of all those assumptions, what do you think is the most important one? Because I want to see how they can quickly choose what's most important. Yeah. Anything else, guys? Any other questions? So I was so super clear that there's no questions, huh? Or I was so totally unclear that I don't even know where to start to ask a question, right? So it's either one of those, or hopefully somewhere in between. Okay. So what I would ask you guys to do, and the reason I make this 45 minutes, because suddenly you always schedule meetings on top of the hour. It gives you that extra time. I would take a few minutes now and reflect on this. What did you take away from this that is the most helpful for you? Remember, reflection is the opportunity to give yourself advice, right? If knowledge was making you successful, then the most successful people in the world would be librarians. But it's not knowledge. It's how you apply the knowledge. So after the call here, take a few minutes and just sort of say, what could I do differently? Or what could I focus on based on the things we shared here? Okay. So it's extremely, extremely important. The most successful people look at it this way. I need 2 things to grow. I need feedback because I can't fix what I don't know. And I need to reflect. So I take what I now know and I use it. And so those are the 2 twins, but I found that without reflection, you just don't move it into action as much as you could. So it's a great thing to do is to have that reflection after everything like this. Okay. So finish it off. Any questions, comments? Okay. On a scale 1 to 10, how valuable was this for you guys? 9, 10, 9, 12, 25. Good, good. Good. I'm glad that you found some things there. I mean, I just tried to package some really key things in this, because it's so important. Now, remember this. The conditions for success is your highest leveraged focus you can have as a leader. Because for everything you enable your people to do, it allows you to do more of your job. Because if I were to ask you to write down the things that you and only you could do as a leader, only you could do, would it be a very long list or would it be a very short list? If I could ask you only to write down the things that only you could do, never, ever, ever delegated, would it be a long or short list? What do you think? Yeah, it'd be very short. So you're going to multiply your power. You're going to multiply everything when you work on the conditions. When you're micromanaging and telling people what to do, you're basically, that's addition power. You tell, they do. You tell, they do. When you create the conditions, they run off and do a hell of a lot because now you've enabled that and you trust them. So guys, thank you very much for participation today. If I can help you guys in any way, here's my contact here. And I will send everybody that registered, I will send out the materials here. I will add this 2-minute video from the orchestra conductor I talked about. And I will also add a 1-page cheat sheet on all the factors that influence people. And I use that all the time because I always want to know as much weapons I have available if I need to influence. So thanks, everybody. Wishing everybody a great finish to your week, and look for the email later today with the materials that you can use. And please feel free to share this to whoever you want. Keep growing more leaders. So thanks, guys. Have a great day.
You too, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Brilliant, Mark. Very concise, really interesting. Great to hear from you again. Take care.
Good. Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.